appreciate everybody being here. My name is Terrence Barkin. I'm the Executive Director of the Graphene Council. We're hosting this session on graphene for the oil and gas sector, and I'm joined by Dilly Lathanathan from Petronas, who will be presenting on behalf of her company the work that they're doing with an advanced materials division and focus on graphene production and application, which I think is really quite interesting. The Graphene Council, for those of you who are not familiar with us already, we are a trade and professional body that operates globally representing the graphene sector. Not only do we work with people who produce graphene, but we work with researchers, application developers, regulators, and end users of graphene to make applications and put it into commerce. We connect about 36,000 materials professionals worldwide, and we've now been active in this sector for 11 years, which in the view of things with graphene is quite quite a history. So on the team, there's myself as executive director. We have a senior analyst based in Madrid. Chirag Ratwani is a PhD material scientist for us out of the UK. John Baker is a health and safety expert and an industrial hygienist based in the US. And Trevor Keel is a PhD material scientist as well out of the UK. That's part of our team. And then we have other support staff in different parts of the world. The Graphene Council provides quite a broad array of services. I'm not going to read all of them here, but basically we help to connect people, disseminate information. We help with regulatory approvals. We help establish standards. We provide material testing, characterization, and validation. We can even do workplace exposure monitoring and provide some health and safety guidance. So anything that you have regarding graphene, if you have questions, we are a neutral, independent third party. We ourselves do not make graphene, nor do we sell it, but we work with individuals, experts worldwide on how to apply it. Graphene has a really interesting history. It goes well before 2004, but we kind of take the 2004 period as the starting point when graphene was first physically isolated, as was recognized in a journal paper. Two scientists out of the University of Manchester in the UK, for which the Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded in 2010, which has kicked off a tremendous frenzy of attention and interest in the material, which also led to some overblown expectations for it. There have been over 150,000 patents related to graphene, and even more than that in terms of research and peer-reviewed papers written about it. And we find ourselves now, as we approach 2025, where graphene is being commercialized and adopted across a wide array of industry sectors, which is one of the things that makes it such an attractive material. What you see in front of you is kind of a genetic picket of obstacles that any new material, whether it was glass from 4,000 years ago, or aluminum, or silicon, or glass fiber, any material has to go through, and that is development of intellectual property, find where it can be used actually in a commercial realm. Eventually, you develop standards for it. You have companies that emerge, etc. And this process of development that all materials go through, and again, if you read the history on any material, they've all kind of gone through this pace. This is a journey that typically takes about 30 years to being fully commercialized. And with graphene, we're 20 years in, but I would say we are developing faster than historically for a whole host of reasons, not the least of which we as the Graphene Council have been working on this for more than a decade to accelerate the development and adoption of this material. So any of you who are looking at this and are relatively new to graphene and thinking, well, it's still well over the horizon, I would argue now is a great time as it goes through a maturation phase and a commercial adoption phase. Graphene as a nanomaterial has some extraordinary properties of being highly thermally conductive, very strong, very electrically conductive, impervious to UV, etc. And because of all of these different properties that the material has, it is also applicable in a really wide range of applications, which is what you see here. We've identified well over 45 markets where graphene has a definite application opportunity and is being adopted. There are some markets, of course, being adopted faster than others. But even there, we're looking at least like 5 or 6 very large markets with batteries, polymers, coatings, and sensors, for example, which is a very exciting one as well, that are all being commercialized as we speak. When I talk about graphene, I want everyone to remember and to consider that graphene is actually a family of materials. You can have graphene that is a single atomic layer of carbon up to and including 10 layers, or you may have something called graphene oxide, which has about 30% oxygen content to it, or you have reduced graphene oxide or functionalized material, which simply means other chemicals or elements have been added to the surface or the edges of the graphene intentionally to improve its properties. That's what we call functionalization. If you're looking to get involved in the graphene sector as a company that's making, using, or developing applications, there are many different entry points, and this can include raw materials. Now, I know Dilly will talk about this, but for the oil and gas sector, for example, there are carbon byproducts that are produced out of the refining process, or there's waste gas like methane gas, which can be considered a raw material to convert into graphene and related advanced carbon materials. So that's something to think about. It doesn't mean just taking, for example, traditionally graphite, but any highly carbon-bearing material can be considered a potential raw material to turn into graphene. Then you have, on the production side, more than a dozen ways of producing graphene. There are electrochemical processes to break it down and liberate the carbon. Or, for example, with methane gas production, you can apply a plasma field to crack the methane molecule. So those are just 2 examples of different ways of applying different production methods to create graphene. And then you have in the middle of this value chain post-production formulation. So this would be like master batching, putting graphene into another substance to kind of preload it, if you will, like a polypropylene plastic in a pelletized form would be an example. Or you have companies in the graphene sector that don't make graphene, but the only thing they do is functionalize or enhance it. So that's their specialty niche. They're not producing graphene, they're enhancing it and making formulations out of it. And then, of course, we have the end users, where it's applied either in automobiles, aerospace, construction materials, even textiles. The very shirt that I'm wearing has graphene embedded in the polymer fibers that were made to spin into this fabric. And so the graphene is permanently embedded into that textile. And we have companies that occupy multiple positions on this value chain. They might be just a raw material provider, or they could be fully integrated all the way up and including producing products. So where does graphene in the oil and gas sector play? For one, graphene can be viewed as a potentially high value added product out of your carbon distillates. For example, natural graphite might be at a market price today of around $1,500 US a metric ton, whereas graphene can be as high as $100,000 a metric ton or well over that, or the low and the bottom on that is probably around $50,000 or $50 a kilo. So even though it's a small volume market, it's an extremely high value add, which is a consideration as companies look to extract more value out of your carbon resources. The other aspect is graphene is typically used as an enhancement for other materials, and specifically for polymers and plastics, it's very applicable there. So you might have some standardized products that are good today, but enhancing them with graphene might be able to get you into a different product category or value add for those materials. So again, things like a polyethylene plastic that's used for packaging has successfully been improved with graphene so that less of it is needed for an improved durability for packaging, which leads me to the next point. As a means of decarbonization. In the example I just gave you, one of our companies was able to remove 70 metric tons of plastic they needed for packaging while still improving the strength of the packaging with less material. So that's a good example of more sustainable production. And graphene production is also used as a decarbonization play. For example, decarbonizing waste methane gas. And then the other thing is the oil and gas sector operates a lot of really high value add assets, either in the refining infrastructure or offshore structures, or increasingly a diversified asset base of wind generation, et cetera. And graphene can be used to improve the strength, durability, and corrosion resistance of these assets. So not only can you now make a high value add product as an oil and gas company, but you can actually use it to make your own infrastructure more sustainable. And that would even go not just to protecting, say, steel structures, but you can improve the strength and durability of concrete, in particular that comes in contact with salt water. So there's a lot of ways to use this material to create value, to help with the decarbonization journey, and to protect assets. And some specific examples, and ones that maybe don't immediately come to mind, graphene can be a great additive for drilling muds, in particular if you have water-based drilling muds used for horizontal drilling, where oil-based drilling fluids can't be used. There's an opportunity there for its thermal properties, for its lubricity, and its durability in these harsh environments. So that's one example. Other examples could be in sensors. Graphene sensors are extremely durable, very small, use a very small amount of energy. They can be highly sensitive. So when you really are concerned about, let's say, poisonous gases and such as that they can be detected at a much more early stage with lower amounts to be detectable. Oil and water separation and cleanup is really interesting. With graphene, it attracts oil, and it's also hydrophobic. And so we've successfully seen product that's come to market using graphene as an oil water separator, either for emergency cleanup or just in the treatment of wastewater for oil and production facilities. And I've already mentioned corrosion protection as another logical and well-proven application for graphene. If you want to look at the size of the markets, and I'm coming close to the end of my short presentation here, graphene can be used in any of the polymers, so any of the plastics, polyethylene, polypropylene, PET, PVC, et cetera. And this is an area where you may, as an oil and gas company, have some downstream markets or plastic production yourself, or your customers do. And this is a way of adding value and attacking those markets. Overall, graphene today is produced at 25,000 metric tons capacity globally. And we expect, because graphene can be added into existing large volume markets like those I just showed you, that once it is adopted for demand, say, for example, graphene is adopted as a de facto standard ingredient in rubber tires, then the volumes are extremely high, because either graphene is in or graphene is not in to those tire markets. It's not going to be added a few tires at a time every year until you get to volume. It's either going to be added in and it improves the properties, which we know it does. And because of that, once graphene is adopted into these major applications, the demand and the volumes needed are extremely high. And that's where a company like Petronas comes in my opinion, because this is a company that will have the capacity one day to the next to ramp a very, very high volume, which is not the case for all sources of production today. I will close my part of the presentation by just saying the Graphene Council produces a graphene report, which is included as a resource for our member companies. It is in 3 volumes. There's quite a lot of information there about standards, material characterization, et cetera, market applications. And finally, we cover more than 200 companies. Actually, it's close to 260 companies that are producing graphene worldwide. So anybody who's interested, that's a pretty exhaustive resource. And with that, these are my contact information. We'll send this out afterwards. And I'm going to stop sharing here and ask Dilly to pull up her presentation. And then what I'm really excited for you all to hear is the perspective from Petronas and what they're doing in this sector. We're very proud to have them as a member company in the Graphene Council. And yeah, so the rest with that, Dilly, when you're ready.
No, thank you, Terence, and welcome everybody. Terence, I think you've pretty much summarized everything to do with graphene, so that saves me a lot of time to not look into graphene properties and what graphene means. And what I will do is take everyone through the journey for Petronas and how we came about with graphene, why graphene, and how are we addressing graphene in the market and how we're taking this to the market to eventually commercialize it as an industrial scale size player. Now, I don't have to talk about this so much because Terence has given a very eloquent description to what graphene can do. But among all of these points over here, which includes graphene as a solution that improves reliability of the host materials, yes, it has a great value proposition to give, and it has versatile applications across multiple industries. Now, all of these is true, but for an oil and gas company like Petronas, or an energy company like Petronas, it was point number 3 that really struck uh, struck or as sat very well with the stakeholders simply because graphene is not just used in a single application, but it has a forest of applications. And that just meant that you could very quickly look at this additive almost like a specialty chemicals, and you can grow the market for this particular additive to hit many different industries. So the growth opportunity in itself was something quite attractive for Petronas. And that was one of the reasons why, even the onset of studying the business case, the stakeholders knew what the market potential really looked like for Petronas to get into this venture. So when it comes to market expectation, now this was done by our consultant, in-house consultants. But what we did see was a healthy growth per annum, 27% per annum growth for graphene. And even then, we think some of these numbers are probably undersized. But one of the key things that Petronas took away from this assessment is that among the hundreds of applications there are, it is worth noting that each application has a certain maturity phase in the market. Not all applications are ready, not all industries are ready to adopt graphene, but among the few that really came out as early adopters of graphene or who are exactly in the right time to adopt graphene was really the battery industry serving the EV market, the composite industry, be it thermosets or thermoplastics, and the coating industry. Now, when it comes to going into certain industries, what we did is that we studied what the market robustness looks like and is the market ready to adopt. And this was one of the initial gauge for Petronas to really understand who might the early adopters be. And if we were to go in, do we go into all the hundreds of applications in multiple industries, or do we choose the ones that are ready? And these were the 3 that came out. And these are the 3 that Petronas is in today. So what do we do really at the in we've been in the we've been looking at the R&D of graphene as early as 2017. It became a strategic focus, R&D strategic focus in 2017, but it wasn't until 2021 that this business was really endorsed as a new business. It was a way for us to diversify our portfolio so that we are not predominantly holding on to just oil and gas portfolio, but we would have a range of different diverse businesses as well. And one of the 9 energy transition businesses today is advanced materials. And really, our intent is to advance materials towards a more sustainable world for better quality of life. And our offerings is down to 3 main products. We call them ProShield Plus, ProCharge Plus, ProTough Plus. Now, ProShield Plus is our first solution that entered the market, and it's a formula that is designed to address corrosion. And it's an additive that is incorporated into performance coatings. This is the most matured matured product line that we have today, one of the first formulas that we launched to the market. Subsequently, we went on to look at formulations for the battery, we call it ProCharge Plus, and formulation for the composite, call that ProTough Plus. Now, what we do is when we launch a solution, we take a very customer-backed approach. And we go to the market, we talk to the customers, we understand what are their pain points and see how graphene can add value or how it can overcome their pain points. Now, in the space of coating, it's very interesting because Petronas itself is a major user of coating, especially anything that effectively addresses corrosion. We have more than 200 our assets in Malaysia. That's just domestic. We've got more assets across the globe. And when we spoke to not just our own Petronas users, but also all the asset users across the globe, leveraging on our network, one of the echoing pain points we heard from everyone, unanimously, in fact, and everyone just naturally went into it, is the fact that any of these assets that has been on the ground for more than 10 years, the biggest pain point that the asset users deal with is corrosion. And corrosion, especially in the performance side, can cost quite a bit of money and inflate the OPEX. And only because without the right performance coating, the asset users would have to frequently repaint, and that frequent repainting cost quite a bit of money for all of the asset users. Now, for Petronas alone, upstream, just to give a bit of context to how much is spent, Petronas spends about 60 million ringgit per year just on repainting, and that's just one business owner. We've got multiple groups of companies within Petronas, and this is just one case, use case that we have studied. Now, 60 million every year just to repaint is quite a big chunk of money. So understanding that, what we did is we came up with a formula that addresses corrosion. And what we've understood is that when it's done right, when it's formulated right, graphene can in fact give higher water barrier properties. And simply because what it does is that it introduces layers and layers of resistance, or puts in lots of tortuous parts before the oxygen and water can actually hit the steel. And because of that, we had a solution which we call ProShield Plus that can effectively extend the service life of the coating. So if our asset users had to repaint every once in 2 years, if not every once in 5 years, best case scenario, today they can talk about extending it by 2 times. And we are, in fact, progressively looking to see how we can extend that to even 3x. And next comes a solution for lithium-ion battery. Now, while coating had a very strong pull to our own mothership, and we saw our own asset users yielding the values and value of having this solution used within Petronas environment itself, battery, on the other hand, was really our venture out of the Petronas environment. Now, when we had our work on lithium-ion battery, graphene for lithium-ion battery, what we really wanted to understand is how do we come up with a solution, a conductive ink really, that would extend the lifespan of the battery, and at the same time effectively address the safety feature. See, a lot of lithium-ion batteries today, they deal with an issue. The operating envelope goes up to 40 degrees Celsius. Now, when you come to a country, the Southeast Asia or the tropical climate regions, you would need to have a higher operating envelope for the battery to really operate smoothly with lesser safety hazards. And that was one of the key things we noticed about graphene. When formulated well, what it does is that it can reduce down the resistance. And when you can knock down the resistance by much, and in our case, we managed to get it up to a reduction of 80%, what we saw was that we could stress that battery performance up to 60 degrees Celsius. And of course, to most lithium-ion battery manufacturers, given that battery works with very high volume. Supply security was one of the things that we heard across the industry. No one was going to disrupt their very stable supply chain, which is currently using carbon black, if not moving into carbon nanotubes, unless they knew that there's going to be supply security for this particular vertical. And composite here, from the onset, what we were really looking at was the pressure vessel group. And what we were trying to address, the pain point that we were trying to address is how do we try to reduce the use of carbon fiber, acknowledging that carbon fiber in itself, it's a costly material. And while at the same time we improve or give it a performance uplift in terms of material stiffness and weight reduction. So that's a little bit about what are the three solutions that we have launched to the market. And we started with the space of formulation first, understanding what are the recipes that we need to create to effectively address the industry's pain points and challenges. But coming back to Petronas, why did we get into this business really? So to Petronas, from the start, when we looked at this business case, it was clear to us that if we were to go into this business, we wanted to be an industrial scale size player. And we had some unique leverages that allowed us to get there. While we started this whole system by looking at just formulations first, we also had our coke to graphene technology that was developed in-house that could effectively derive coke, petroleum waste product coke, into graphene. And when it comes to petroleum waste product, we had huge amount of petroleum byproduct, petroleum coke over here. And we had about 450,000 tons per annum from our refinery that we had access to. Now, being able to convert that using our technology, which we call today coke to graphene, allowed us to have some level of confidence that when it's time to scale up, access to raw material will not be an issue, and the focus would very much be on the technology side and optimizing the processes within the technology so that we can scale up. And knowing that we have the formulations in place and we are able to today enter the market at small scale as we continuously scale up. But at the same time, coming from this industry and Petronas having been around for 5 decades, one of the things that we are extremely cognizant of is to get into any new ventures or to build a business, we need strong partners. And that is a stand that Petronas takes, that there are many ways we can enter the market together with our fellow peers, if not with our other graphene producers and other service providers within this ecosystem. And while we have our global network and resources to grow the business, we also welcome partnerships as well as opportunity to grow together, create categories for our customers beyond just Petronas' supply system. So we do maintain an adaptable stance on graphene material sources and production technology. And we would note that our supply system will always be not just coke to graphene, but we also will look at partnerships to look at who are the other graphene producers who can add value to our entire ecosystem, all with an end in mind to back integrate the value chain and scale it up to meet the industry's needs. And as we speak to our fellow industry players, one of the things that we always look at is how do we build our self-reinforcing loop, growth loop, so to speak. Now, while we started with graphene formulation, the whole idea here was to enhance the performance in the application. Wherever the application sits, the formulation was supposed to give a significant performance uplift that allows the performance of that particular application to be extended and improved by minimum 2x. Now, we knew that once the enhanced performance is there, coupled with the fact that the way the technology is done, which is circular in nature, using waste material into a high-value premium additive, it would naturally drive the demand. And with that higher demand, we're able to scale up the graphene, and with that scale up, provide a lower cost structure. A lower cost structure would mean that lower pricing, which matters. No matter what we say, no matter how value-based pricing or how premium the additive is, when the users want to adopt it, the pricing on the initial capital outlay does matter, and we've come to realize that as well. So at the end, at the end of the assessment, everything that we do goes down to how do we reduce that values or the initial price just so that the adoption picks up. And with this, we'll be able to unlock more applications. And now I'm latching back to what Terence mentioned earlier. We've got so many more, the likes of rubber, the likes of cement, but these are all highly margin sensitive applications. And margin, like all margin sensitive applications, you would need to lower down the price to improve the or increase the adoption. And with that, this loop just gets activated and we would see graphene growing in the market. Now, aside from that, of course, we're not just limiting ourselves to just cook to graphene. As we speak today, we're still in the initial stages of R&D, but one of the things that we are assessing today is how do we derive graphene from our CO2 gas? Using same, our basis is still electrochemical processes, but this is one of the future frontiers that we have as part of the continuous improvement in our technology offerings to the market. So yes, I think that ends my sharing today. And back to you, Terence. I'm open to Q&A.
Yeah, no, that was a really good presentation. I appreciate that. I've got a couple of questions for you, and if anybody has a question for Dilly or for myself, please use the Q&A, or you can also use the chat feature to raise a question. We have, as I mentioned to you, this was kind of the genesis for us to put on this webinar to help address the oil and gas sector. We have been approached as the Graphene Council over the past, I would say, 2 years by a number of other oil and gas companies that are interested in this sector from different entry points. Is there any word of advice? I know it's a loaded question. Is there any word of advice you would have for your industry colleagues who are looking at this and say, "Wow, there's so many opportunities here. How do we get involved?" What would you say to that?
Of course, I would say this business takes a lot of strategic patience, for sure. And one of the things that to my fellow peers who are looking to get into this new venture build, one of the things to relate to the stakeholders and to the masses out there is that uh, to not be underwhelmed with the initial entry, because the numbers will never be as enormous as what an oil and gas or an energy provider is used to seeing, especially in those early days. And having strategic patience and recognizing when it's truly a BD phase is important to see through this venture.
Excellent. Yeah, I think there's a lot of different opportunities, and certainly, I would say if you have questions, don't be afraid to contact the Graphene Council to help you answer some of those. We do it impartially, and obviously, Dilly, I think it's fantastic you've been willing to share some of your experiences here. We do have a couple of questions coming in. One here is the market for graphene or with its formulation, can we put a light on pricing? Now, before you answer that, I just want to say, as the Graphene Council, we're very conscientious of antitrust regulation, so we don't really discuss prices or recommend pricing on this. That is something that we do address in the graphene report. We can say that there is quite a wide range of pricing for graphene. Because graphene is it's not one material, it's a family of materials, so some of them are more expensive than others, and it's very volume dependent. I would say that. Let me just see. So there's one of the participants. I think I'll encourage him to reach out to you because he'd like to talk to you about developing something together with some of the waste product they have. There's another question here. Typically, adoption of an innovation, we see that there's a chasm occurs between the early adopters and the early majority. What are some of those challenges you're encountering?
That is a great question. So yeah, we were very optimistic for sure when we saw traction or users saying, yes, we are going to adopt graphene, and we thought we could enter the market very quickly. But what we've come to realize is there's a lot of respect to qualifying the material. That is really one of the initial challenges that we face is the time it takes to really test the material in the customer side and go through the whole 9 yards of testing and then qualifying it. And that takes time. Now, even after you get past that, you would very soon realize, even as we did, there are many influences in the value chain. Now, it might seem like the person who's cutting the PU is directly right next to you, slightly above that value chain, but beyond them, say for example, in the coating segment, even the applicators have a say in adopting this. And then the asset users. And even within the asset users, there are many parts of the company who would come in and have a certain view on when this should be adopted, how it should be adopted. Now, even as we get past all of these hurdles, the final hurdle would be now, there's a lot of value proposition that we speak of when it comes to graphene, but really it does not have field record. Everything that we do is based on simulation and lab testing. So the pricing now comes into question because we tagged a premium to the pricing. But for anyone to take this on without field record would mean that they would always have a certain doubt. So there are quite a few challenges. I wouldn't say so many, but you would need to overcome them as you go along that journey. And there are answers to it. There are ways around it. There's a lot of work to it, but it can be done.
Yeah, I'll just add 2 cents to that. We've spent a lot of time recently, and we've actually written some articles that published in Nature Physics about the development of graphene into a commercial product and where it's at in that development chain. Because of who we are as the Graphene Council, we engage with a lot of end user industries, R&D development, application developers, product developers, who are working on graphene applications in their industries, but none of that work is patented, none of it is published, none of it, they don't talk about it. And in some cases, even when they bring it to market, they don't want to tell anybody because they want to keep it as a competitive advantage. So, which is very frustrating for us because we'd love to let more people know that it's being used. But one example is Vittoria Tires, bike tires, a racing bike tire company in Italy that has now put graphene in all of their tires, and it's a standard ingredient for them. And so I would just say that we're getting over this period of we know we can make graphene, we can make it at scale. It's being tested in these applications, as Dilly said. Depending on the application area, that is a multi-year process to bring it to market. But we're going through those stages. It's not like that's not happening. That is definitely happening right now. So one of the other questions was the last slide mentioned, Dilly, that using CO2 instead of the petroleum coke is one of the potential feedstocks. How far off is Petronas with developing that, do you think?
It's in a very early TRL stage, Terence. We're still pre-TRL4, and that has a little bit more legwork in place, and I would imagine it will take a few years before we can bring this. So really the focus today is on our C2G, and at the same time, also working with our other industry partners and suppliers to help us create those categories.
Absolutely. And that is something, this is an area where, the Graphene Council can assist as well, because we do work with companies that are working on some of these applications. I do know that CO2 extraction or destruction really is a hot topic, and we have some companies that are focused on that technology. And I don't want to take anything away from Dilly's thunder on this, but that's where we help to try to connect companies where you can build it or you can buy it, right? You can work with partners, which we think, and we really try to foster a sense of collaboration in this industry as we're trying to build the ecosystem. And that's, again, I don't want to put words in Dilly's mouth, but one of the reasons I believe Petronas has agreed to do this presentation and kind of share their philosophy on this is to encourage other companies in the oil and gas sector to also look at this to help us grow the market, because there's going to be a need for multiple sources of supply for large, sophisticated customers. And it helps actually to grow the market if there's more than just one or two companies that are doing this.
Yeah, absolutely, Terence. I definitely echo that point. Supply security and creating categories and collaboration is really the way to go in this industry.
Let's take just a couple more questions, and then I think we'll kind of close this off. There is a question about health and safety and about exposure. And that's I'll say a couple of words about that if you don't mind, Dilly, just because
Of course.
we've done a lot of work on this. In the United States, we work with NIOSH, the National Institutes for Occupational Safety and Health, on workplace exposure setting. We work with EPA and other regulators on safe exposure levels. And this is one reason we recommend working with a company like a Petronas that actually makes the product. And what you would receive as a customer is not a black nano powder that you then have to work with, but you would receive a formulation or a master batch in which it is a much, much, much safer way to handle it. And graphene is not inherently dangerous. It's just that nobody should be handling any nanomaterial that's in a powder form that possibly can be inhaled. So it's carbon, so it's an inert substance. But we recommend that you deal with companies that can provide you with master batches or formulations so that you don't have to worry about these exposure risks. So one of the questions, what is the basic difference between graphene and flash graphene? If anybody's not familiar with what flash graphene refers to, there's a method out of Rice University that applies an electric charge through a carbon material to convert it into graphene. So that's what flash graphene is. And then the question is asking, aside from the cost of production, can flash graphene be used in most of the applications like coatings, concrete, battery, and composites? I have an answer for that, but Dilly, did you want to comment on that at all, or do you want to leave that one for me to?
No, I'll leave it to you, Terence.
Okay. So the way I'll answer this question is there are a dozen different ways of making graphene, and there are a dozen different source materials from recycled plastics to biomass. Graphite, of course, is the original and traditional way. And then, as you've seen from the Petronas presentation, oil byproducts like petroleum coke can be used. And so the way I'll answer this is at the end of the day, what matters is what is the exact material in terms of graphene, and does it qualify as graphene from an ISO definition perspective from 1 to 10 layers of carbon of sp2 bonded carbon. And then what is really also important in how these materials perform and whether they're suitable for a battery application or for a coating or whatever is the detailed morphology of the primary particles. And that means lateral size, do they have contaminants like trace metals, all these things. And so that's why I would say it's incredibly important for companies to deeply characterize their material to know exactly what they have so you know why it behaves and where it applies. The Graphene Council has collected now more than 750 individual technical data sheets of different types of graphene available in the market. So the answer isn't necessarily specific for flash graphene because that's actually not the relevant question. The question is, what are you actually producing, and what is relevant then? Okay, and there was another question that was related to that. So if there anybody else who has questions, please use the Q&A dialog box to write your question, and then we'll address that. And in the meantime, then, Dilly, I do have questions for you. So, we've talked about this before. Oil and gas companies are looking like for all the different reasons. Why should I get involved with graphene? Is it a material we should be looking at and stuff? What has surprised you maybe the most, or an unexpected experience over this journey from when Petronas said, "Look, this is something we really want to get into," and you've launched? What just share some of your experience, maybe things that were unexpected or that you've learned along the way.
Right. Um, some of the learnings that we have is with graphene, it has so much of value even for Petronas. It's not just meant for the external market, but even for us as users of technology, this carries so much of value. So, in the space of corrosion, I spoke about us having more than 200 over assets. Now, we also spend tens of millions on repainting exercise. Now, when you have a solution that can extend the service life of the coating, that means that we would see impact in our OPEX savings. And that having that much of tangible value for Petronas itself helps helps or brings a compelling case to why we should invest in this business. Now, like every other energy businesses too, I think majority of my peers too will be looking at how to diversify the business and go into the e-mobility, the hydrogen, all of the other new businesses. And we're definitely not alone in this journey. And looking at applications like composite and battery, it still carries some value back to the new businesses that we're trying to launch. So my biggest learning in this journey, and not just me and my team of 15 very hardworking people, is that we've learned that it carries so much of value back to that mothership that you can't overlook it. Now, beyond that, it also has potential to get to that external market. What it really needs is strategic patience.
Yeah. No, I hear you on that. And the good news is we know that on the development pipeline, which can take years before a product goes from prototyping, R&D, trial, and then it gets to commercial field, that can take several years. I have a slightly different question, and then we're going to take some from the participants here. Today all the attention's on sustainability, on carbon reduction and everything else. And there's different ways with carbon credits or carbon capture and sequestration, et cetera. And, personally, I don't think taking carbon and burying it underground is necessarily the highest best use or way of doing this. I think there's better ways, and making graphene and then putting it into useful products, I think is a good way. How do you see, or how does Petronas see where this activity fits from the sustainability perspective, which everyone is chasing today?
Right, right. Um, so when it comes to the graphene business, Petronas's position is really to provide that performance uplift first. What we really want to do is extend that performance of any host application that we are going into. It could be in the coating space, extending that service life. Extending that service life would mean that today you would no longer need to repaint every once in 5 years, but you get to repaint it every once in 10 years. Now you would immediately see a scope 3 carbon reduction over there because you would not need to deploy resources offshore and onshore doing this repainting exercise. But what really sells Terence, be it whether we are supporting the coating industry or the EV industry, is that at the end of the day, the users want to see the performance uplift first before bringing sustainability angle into the conversation.
That
Now,
makes
it's
sense.
still
Yeah.
it's still a point that gets deliberated, but it's the performance that they're going for at the end of the day when it comes to material.
So if I recharacterize it, this is what I'm hearing. Forget the sustainability angle as the driving motivation. You have performance, right? You get an uplift and you get a better product, and you're going to have some economic benefits from that. And the added
Absolutely.
benefit is it adds to the sustainability point.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
That
it accelerates when there's an impetus around the sustainability agenda. It accelerates adoption, but you still need to get past the first hurdle, which is the performance uplift.
excellent. It took a little while, but now we have lots of questions coming in.
Everyone's getting warmed up.
Yeah. So I know there was a question. Let me just get back here. A question about the ProShield technology. Is it a formulation in paint, or do you sell it as an additive? So if I'm a paint manufacturer, do I get ProShield and then I add it? How is it delivered, or how does it get into an end product?
It's sold as an additive, and what our paint manufacturers do is that they incorporate it into their finished application, the paint system. There are no changes to the process, there's nothing different in the operating conditions. That makes it so much easier for them to adopt because they wouldn't have to do any tweaks on their side.
Excellent. Um, I'll go through some of these kind of quick. What is the graphene quality according to the Graphene Council standards required for electrically based application like conductors or batteries? And the way I would answer that is maybe just contact us and have a direct conversation about that, because it really depends on the specific morphology in the application. It might be different for a battery as part of a battery slurry and where it fits in the battery. So if it's the anode, cathode, or even in the separator, or if it's for electronics. And then again, is it for energy density, or is it for thermal management, stuff like that? There's another question, and this is for you, Dilly. Are you looking to collaborate with industry players? And if so, which is your application of focus? I know you listed three there, but which industries or how would, and maybe how you look to collaborate?
Collaboration could come in many different forms, Terence, and yes, those three verticals are really our primary focus today. But a collaboration that we're looking at is seeing how we can create more categories for our customer. Uh, are looking to collaborate with graphene suppliers out there, for sure. We're also seeing the importance of functionalizing the graphene, and we've come to realize that it would be helpful to have more partners who can support us in that functionalization journey. So we will definitely open to collaborating in that space, and even with our other industries who are the likes of Petronas who are using this solution, we could also collaborate to see how we can develop customized formula for the asset users as asset owners, what would benefit them ultimately. So it really is collaboration in many ways across that value chain, and where we see the most potential is when all groups come together and there's a radical partnership from the one who's pulling the demand to the one that's pushing the material.
This topic highlights something super important for graphene development. The history of this has been graphene companies have just sent out samples to people and said, work with it and get back to us and let us know how it went, and that almost always fail, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I think, knowing what Petronas is capable of, you have a really strong asset in the application development side of this and how to apply it. And reading into your comment about collaborating with other graphene producers, I think it underscores different types of graphene for different applications, right? And using these materials in combination, but having the capability to know how to do the application development is key. And that's what I see you guys really bring to the table, which is critical to making this work, right? And not blaming the material if it doesn't work. It's how you apply it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it takes a couple of iterations to get there and a long time to just test it out in all phases.
Well, if we all work together, we can reduce that cycle
I
time, right?
think so too. I think so too. We can compress time here.
Absolutely. Another question, does it make sense for an energy company to venture into the end application markets such as e-mobility or polymers, which are not directly related to oil and gas? So this is more of a downstream or a vertical integration into the products. What's your opinion about that?
Oof, that really depends on the appetite of the company itself. This is a tough one to answer. I
Yeah,
mean, Petronas has done that. Petronas has done that, but we had to study the case, the business case, really hard. And even then, I think we're still figuring our way around these new ventures.
yeah, it's just from an observation, having done this for 11 years now and seeing different business models as people go to market, vertical integration or semi-vertical integration. I would say, if you get into that and you start doing plastic master batches, you're no longer in the graphene business, you're in the plastics business because you're competing with other plastics or paints or batteries, right? We have several graphene companies that are now making battery cells. So they're really in the battery business. They just happen to be using graphene. And I think you're right. That's a momentous decision to make is how far downstream
Absolutely.
you want to play.
Yeah.
Um, Another question is, what is the shape or form of the product? Does it come as a powder? Is it, they're asking about particular, is it functionalized? Is it dispersion? I don't know how much you want to discuss.
It's
The-
primarily master batches that we give out,
yeah.
dispersed in solvents, or dry composites, depending on the application that we are serving.
Another quick question here is, and I hope we have a few more minutes of your time, Dilly. I don't, I want to be
Yeah.
respectful.
No
Um,
worries.
uh, how will graphene from the petroleum coke affect the asphalt market? And that could, I guess the question is, using graphene in asphalt. Have you guys looked at
No,
putting it in bitumen? No.
no,
Okay.
we haven't. We haven't.
I will say there have been some trials of graphene in asphalt and bitumen, and they have proven positive. But I think you mentioned, some of the large scale markets that are extremely price sensitive, like asphalt, like cement. They're very margin sensitive, so that's a
It's
difficult one.
extremely. In fact, to get into this space, we need to first scale up and bring that cost structure down because it's not an easy space to get into pricing wise.
Absolutely. On the ProCharge question, is it a cathode additive, or in how is it used in the battery?
It's a cathode additive. It's coated around the active materials, and we use it for both NMC chemistry as well as LFP battery chemistry.
Okay. This is one, I think this is outside kind of your area of focus because it's a different use, but I want to ask the question anyways. Can graphene-based sensors detect reactive oxygen species with real-time analysis?
Oh,
Good one.
wow. I don't think I have an answer for that.
Yeah, I would say so. This question kind of illustrates the versatility of graphene. So what Petronas is making and what we've been focusing about putting it in physical products is more for multi-layer graphene material that's at scale and bulk. And when we talk about sensing technology, literally you could almost count the number of atoms you need on the sensing surface. You're just using a single layer of graphene as a sensing platform. But the answer is there's tremendous progress being made on the sensing side. So the relevance for an oil and gas environment from a sensing perspective is extremely high. And I would just invite you to contact us because that's a different sector to play in. It's a different form of graphene, but it's still graphene. And then the last question I think that we have here, and we can close after this, how does Petronas overcome the CO2 generation of petroleum coke via coker or visco breaker for graphene formation? And I, this is material you're already making, right? The petroleum coke
This
is all,
material,
yeah,
yeah. Either way, we have this material at our dispense. It's really making some value out of this material as opposed to just throwing it away or selling it out as another form of energy to potential users out there.
yeah. So really taking it's a byproduct that you've been producing. It's part of the process,
Yeah, it,
and the
it's
question
being
is what
churned out anyway. Yeah,
gotcha. So it's much better to put it to a much higher value use than discarded or
absolutely. Yeah.
okay. Excellent. Well, I would just ask if you have any closing comments from my side, Dilly. Again, I want to say thank you so much. Your time is very valuable, and I think it's also quite generous of Petronas to make you available and to share your story, why Petronas entered this sector. I think it's really important for peers in the oil and gas field to see that this isn't a theoretical opportunity. This is a real life opportunity that you guys are developing into a substantial business for Petronas. And I also appreciate the collaborative stance because I think that's very forward thinking, and I think that's also a very successful approach. Any closing comments or anything you want to share with us before we end today's webinar?
Um, Not really, except to all of my friends and colleagues who are looking to get into this business, absolutely, graphene, there's a lot of potential over here, and the time is just right. We've really gone past technology demonstration into commercial adoption, and in time, we will see a larger commercial adoption taking place. Full commercialization, as you would put it, Terence. But this process takes patience and it takes a lot of partnerships and collaboration. And that's one of the reasons why even I'm here, Terence, allocating my time talking about this, because I don't think just one of us can do it. But if few partners were to come together and really take this seriously and move this to the market, this material really has far too much potential to give and a lot of benefits that a lot of users can yield or benefit from. But that's a little bit from me.
No, that's fantastic. I think that just reemphasizes why the Graphene Council exists is to bring these parties together to help you guys connect with each other and for you to take that industry forward. We're here to support you. We're really proud to have Petronas as a member of the Graphene Council, and anything we can do to help you and everybody else in this sector succeed is why we're here. So
Absolutely.
thank you, Dilly, and I hope everybody enjoys the rest of your day, the rest of the week. Thank you for your time and attention, and we'll be sending out links for the recording and for the slides from what you've seen today. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you,
Take,
Terence. Thank you,
take,
everyone. Have a good day. All right.
take care.
Take care. Bye.
For more information on market opportunities and to connect with experts, contact the Graphene Council at theggraphenecouncil.org.